Once that enrollment process is done, which 90% of the data is collected in the summer, we'll obviously follow up after harvest to get yields, transportation information, and drying information for the corn crop. But after those couple of meetings, we are ready to generate our favorite deliverable, farmer's favorite deliverable, and that's what we'll get into here, this resource analysis and assessment plan, the RAAP report that Greg mentioned. This meeting here is going to last up to 2 hours. We'll deliver these in February and March. You get a snapshot here of what type of time commitment we're talking about for a farmer. We hit on the enrollment meeting. We hit on the harvest data collection meeting. We'll get into this RAAP delivery, and then there'll also be phone calls throughout the year to talk about practices in different programs a farmer is eligible for. At the beginning of the report, we are going to hit on a handful of high-level topics. The first thing here is making sure the farmer is aware of all the different programs and opportunities that are out there for them. Some of them are going to be exclusive through PCM for our farmers that we've worked with our partners on to offer for our growers. And then we're also going to make sure that we're trying to look at and find out every program that's available out there to the farmer. So even ones that are not exclusive to us, but just letting farmers know that there are other financial incentives out there, or maybe even better technical service than what we can provide, or other practices that a farmer might be interested in. We don't do a ton of EduField, which we'll get into, and I'll make a note of that, but we definitely like to let farmers know that we have partners and resources that are out there to help them with that. We'll hit on the nutrient loss reduction strategy within this local resource concern page. This is our education piece, maybe the biggest education piece outside of the individual practices that we're going to give a farmer, and letting them know where we're currently at within the NLRS and any updates related to those local resource concerns that they could be affecting with their farming practices. We'll definitely hit on the security here, which I've already mentioned once. We'll tell a farmer that the data that they enter into our portal, anytime that it is shown outside of that report, it's going to be aggregated and anonymized. So we are very, very sure of that safety around the farmer data and protecting that information. Once the farmer goes into our portal, there's a bolded code down at the bottom, and that's what a farmer turns into once they go into our system. So their name is stripped from that data, and that allows us to aggregate it and anonymize it. I mentioned EduField practices. Here's our philosophy on infield. We're going to try to fix any issues with infield practices first. So we focus on tillage, nitrogen management, and cover crops. We want to keep land that's in production. We want to keep that in production and help these farmers fix any issues with those conservation practices. Within the report, next we'll move into the data sections of the report. First, we'll give a summary back to the farmer of how many fields they have in the program, how many acres. We'll give yields, nitrogen rates, nitrogen use efficiencies. How many pounds of nitrogen does it take to raise a bushel of grain? That's the summaries we'll give to the farmer. And even this becomes a valuable piece to our growers who are sometimes keeping this type of information in multiple notebooks. We always give the example of keeping data in shoe boxes in their office. This is valuable because we keep it concise in just a couple of pages of the information and data that they're interested in. Once we're done looking at the summary of the data, we'll talk about the MRTN rate, the maximum return to nitrogen. I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with that U of I recommended rate. This is another education piece, and this is a time where we will compare a farmer to that rate, have those discussions around how our most profitable farmers do fall within that MRTN rate, and then begin the discussion of how to reduce that into the MRTN range for that farmer's operation. We will let a farmer know where we believe they stand or where our data shows they stand for conservation trends, give them this scorecard, basically a report card hopefully showing improvements as it relates to those three practices that I mentioned: cover crops, nitrogen, and tillage. And we'll track that throughout the year to hopefully show continuous improvement. We'll also considering different factors that obviously play in year by year. We also use the Field to Market field print platform to assess farmers on these sustainability metrics of land use, soil conservation, energy, greenhouse gas emissions. Field to Market produces field prints. There is a ton of information in those field prints. However, sometimes it can be tough to understand exactly what we should be looking at. So what we've tried to do here is to split out each of these sustainability metrics, show them in its own graph. You see there in the land use chart, we can point to a farmer and show them how their individual fields are affecting their average or their year by year analysis, and then compare them to other PCM farmers or other farmers that are using a practice that we see as most beneficial. So that's the land use chart you see. We also do the same sort of comparison with the operator and land return there at the top of the slide. We also consider the Cool Farm tool as it relates to the greenhouse gas emissions. The meat of the report comes in this version of an economic analysis. So these are very similar to what FarmDoc produces, very similar to what the Farm Business Farm Management group produces. And what we've done here is using line items and pairing FBFM economic data, FarmDoc economic data with actual agronomic information from the farmer. Pairing those two things, we generate these tables here that we can then compare how the individual farmer looks versus the regional average versus the county average, to give them an idea of if they're doing better or worse, or if there's any improvements that we can make within those decisions. After that, we'll dive down to a deeper level of an individual field page. And here is where a specialist, after talking about the economics, then they can come here and make a note about a suggestion or a recommendation. And we do that there in that blue box and that empty box there next to the field map. And that's going to happen with all this other information you see on this slide. So a summary of all the years of what's happened on that field, a chart over to the left that's messy to you all looking at it right now. But what that's saying too, once it gets cleaned up a bit, is how a field compares to other fields within the operation. So what we like to do is maybe find a field that's holding a farmer back or is consistently the most porous field within the operation, and then use that field to make a suggestion on for a cover crop, or maybe changing up the nitrogen rate, reducing a tillage, things like that is what a specialist might be making a recommendation on. That would be the end of the report. Like I said, 45 minutes to a couple hours for the report. Next steps will be following up, matching a farmer to a program, and then just helping them step by step with implementing any of those practices that the specialist might have recommended.